everybody, and welcome. My name is Calvin Portley, and I'm with the UCLA Anderson Healthcare Business Association. Today, we have the incredible privilege of hearing from one of the country's preeminent minds and thought leaders in the world of genomics and biotechnology, and satellite communications, gender differences, organ transplantation, Middle East peace, and being a very loving and dedicated parent. Dr. Martine Rothblatt falls to the very rare and esteem-worthy category of jack of all trades and master of each. She was raised in Southern California and possesses a childhood passion for outer space that would stay with her through college, graduating summa cum laude in communication studies from UCLA, with her thesis being on international direct broadcast satellites. And following undergrad, Martine earned her J.D. MBA also from UCLA and studied several different components before she became a corporate lawyer and launched several satellite communication companies. The companies included the first nationwide vehicle location system, GeoStar, in 1983, the first private international space-com project, PanAmSat, in 1984, and the first global satellite radio network, WorldSpace, in 1990, and the first non-geostationary satellite-to-car broadcasting system, Sirius satellite radio, in 1990 also. It's a tongue twister. But she put the world of satellite communications behind and turned her focus to life sciences due to a life-threatening diagnosis for her daughter with pulmonary hypertension. Dr. Rothblatt first created the PPH Cure Foundation and later founded United Therapeutics in 1996 and served as the chairman of its board of directors and the CEO since its inception. She has since earned a Ph.D. in medical ethics from the Royal London College of Medicine and Dentistry. Everyone please join me in putting your hands together for Dr. Martine Rothblatt.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like a crumb right now in comparison to Martine's incredible accomplishments. We are truly in the presence of a Renaissance woman, and who's written books, as Calvin said, on genetic engineering, on satellite communication, on organ transplants, on gender differences, on Mideast peace, and she piloted her own helicopter over here this morning. It's the truth. And to my house last night, also piloted her own helicopter. So, not in my backyard, I might say. But we are so privileged to have you here, Martine. And I want to start with where it all started, and that's UCLA. And how many of you are in the AMR field study project phase right now? Okay, listen carefully. This all started with Dr. Rothblatt's, Martine's field study project. So take us through how you went from the field study to really revolutionizing satellite communications.
Sure, thanks a lot, Judy, and I feel really, really happy to be here. I love UCLA, and I feel tremendously blessed that I had the opportunity of an education at UCLA that prepared me so well for everything else that I've done. With regard to the field studies project, I was in the J.D. MBA program, and we were given we had the requirement to do a group field studies project, basically to develop a business plan for a company off campus, and there were a number of choices. As Calvin mentioned, I had always been in love with space technology, and one of the companies that had signed up with the Field Studies Office was called Hughes Space and Communications Group out in El Segundo. My other three group mates were pretty agnostic. They didn't, really have any particular career direction, but I said, this one is really good, let's do it. So we went out to meet with the treasurer of Hughes Space and Communications Group, and that in and of itself was very impressive, that the School of Business Field Studies office was, I think you call it AMR now?
We do call it AMR now.
So the AMR office was able to get these kind of, snivelly-nosed students to meet with the treasurer of a huge corporation.
We don't have any of those anymore.
Okay. I was one. Okay. And so that was like, wow, in a sense I was kind of like tongue-tied. And then he said that they were building satellites for the United States, and they knew they needed to start building satellites for other countries in the world. But at the time, the technology was such that if they were to build a satellite for South America, it could not provide a good communication service for all of South America. It would have to focus the beam of its energy on one country or another, or one part of South America or another. And with satellites, the more you focus the energy, the smaller the receiving dish could be. So that would in turn result in a larger market. And their business plan question for us was to come up with a quantitative way for them to decide, not only for South America, but for any part of the world, if they were to launch a satellite sort of on speculation of a business, which countries should they focus their energy on to have the largest market. And then they introduced us to the person that actually invented the geostationary satellite. His name was Harold Rosen, and he was the chief scientist of Hughes Space and Communications Group. Being a satellite nerd as I was like, you know, seriously gaga about meeting this guy who invented the geostationary satellite. But he was very nice and helpful. And so the team got together and we put together an algorithm that would take all sorts of UN information in terms of social, cultural, economic, technical information, phone lines per 100 inhabitants, you know, stuff like this. Put it all into an algorithm, which we number crunched with one of the, you know, very first computers in a business school, which was here at Anderson. I got my first programming experience in doing something like that here.
So the team itself developed the algorithm?
Yeah, the team, it wasn't anywhere sitting anywhere. We developed it just through brainstorming, group meetings. People would say, you know, well, it should be like, you know, this demographic and that demographic, or this metric and that metric. And then others of us would challenge each other and say, well, how do we know that's going to correlate with demand for communication service? So it was a lot of library research, a lot of field research. We also interviewed everybody at Hughes in Communications to get that human knowledge component, which is invaluable.
I just want to remind everyone here, you think you have a challenging project. Listen to this, yes?
I'm sure all the projects are really challenging, but this one at the end, we were then able to, we labeled our report PanAmSat because it was a satellite. That was not a name that Hughes had coined. We wanted to have a name for a satellite that could serve all of South America, and so we called it PanAmSat. And we presented it to the board of directors of Hughes Space Communications Group. It's, they used to be in that building, if you know, by LAX. It has the big radomes on top of the roofs, and on sort of the south side of the runways. And they said, wow, this is really, really interesting. We really like it. Hal Rosen, the chief scientist who had invented geostationary satellites, he asked some probing questions like, you know, why this metric and not that metric, and why televisions per 100 inhabitants would correlate to number of satellite dishes that the market could support. But you know, they said, okay, thank you, goodbye, and you know, I don't even remember if those were graded or not. Those reports were graded or not.
Yeah.
But we graduated, which so at least it was good enough to graduate. And subsequently, I called the treasurer, and I actually kept in touch with him a little bit. His name was Wayne Wells. And Hughes never went forward with the project, and he didn't really give me any clear reason why. But probably they were just focusing on the U.S. market and weren't thinking about other countries. So I then moved to Washington, D.C. because that was the headquarters of the satellite communications industry.
Well, your first job out of school was as a lawyer.
As a lawyer.
Arguing for the satellite industry before the FCC.
Right, which was in Washington, D.C. Right. Exactly.
But
so
a direct continuation of this line of inquiry.
Exactly, yeah. I was recruited from UCLA Law School. The law firms come and they interview people. and a Washington law firm, it was then the largest Washington law firm, Covington and Burling, they said, oh, you know a lot about satellites. You did this MBA, project on satellites. I said, yes. And they said, well, we'll give you a lot of work on satellites. So I was like really excited about that. And they moved me, I was a single parent at the time, so they moved me and my son to Washington, paid our relo expenses. And I started working at Covington. And it turns out that their clients were all of the land-based broadcasters, like the terrestrial, what they call the terrestrial broadcasters, who were feeling what was then like NBC, CBS, ABC, and they were then feeling threatened by satellite communications because they thought that people would like start tuning into satellites and not watching their programs so much, like DirecTV and stuff like that. So my job was to think of every reason why the Federal Communications Commission should not approve DirecTV to the US. And like this was kind of sacrilegious for me because space was my business, and I did know from legal ethics that even if you think a person's guilty, they still deserve to be represented and have vigorous representation. But and they were very kind. I said to them, well, I need to go to satellite communications conferences so I can understand how the enemy thinks. And so they sent me to these satellite communications conferences. And at the conferences, I would look for people who were satellite entrepreneurs and say, hey, I've got a great business plan. Everybody is making business in the US, but there's hundreds of millions of people in Latin America and Asia and Africa, and satellites makes even more sense for them. Just like today, we realize that cellular has allowed people outside the US to leapfrog over the wireline infrastructure. So I finally met one man who had a land-based Spanish language television network called SIN, Spanish International Network. His name was Rene Anselmo. And he had been frustrated because he was renting one channel on a satellite built by Hughes and was being charged exorbitant rates, and was and that was how he distributed his television programming to his TV stations in LA, New York, Chicago, Miami. And I said, Rene, for the amount of money that you are paying Hughes to rent this channel, you could have your own satellite and it could cover all of Latin America, and we could even design it so that you could send Latin American programming direct via satellite to the US and US programming direct via satellite to Latin America. So Rene Anselmo loved the idea, and I showed him my thesis from UCLA. Fortunately, they didn't have IP on it or anything like that. And so the company was then born with the funding from Rene Anselmo called PanAmSat. And the funny ending to that story is that PanAmSat was a tremendously successful satellite communications company. It ultimately was purchased by Hughes, the very people that did not want to do my business plan for maybe it would have cost them $50 million. They ended up paying $5 billion to buy PanAmSat, which by then had satellites all over the world. And then ultimately, Hughes in turn, the satellites of Hughes were purchased by Intelsat, which is an international satellite communications company that was in fact the one originally charging an arm and a leg to Rene Anselmo. So all of the whole PanAmSat idea, the whole MBA thesis, field study project, ended up being integrated into the largest global satellite communication system.
Amazing. But it doesn't end there. From there, you created Sirius.
Yes, so I did that, and you learn an immense amount building up a business like that. But I really feel that something that has probably improved a lot from the 80s till now in MBA education is I didn't really feel that anybody in all the classes I took in management school, nobody really said to me when you start a company, make sure that you get half the stock as founder stock, or a quarter, or I don't even remember anybody even talking about that at all. I mean, talked about finance, talked about like organizational development, statistics, accounting. I don't remember anybody having, I didn't remember one single class on like board of directors, and I don't remember one single class on, okay, now you've got your company, make sure you get a whole bunch of founder stock at the beginning when nobody really cares. So I did learn that.
I think we've improved on that.
Smart, good, very good. So, so PanAmSat, I was just earning a salary. I never got any of the founder stock in that company, but I learned all the lessons and I saw how it happened. So I said to myself, well, if you are building, if a larger satellite lets you have a smaller Earth station, maybe if we built a really, really big satellite, we could get the receiving antenna so small that it could be flat on top of a car. And then we could do for radio what cable TV did for cable, which is charge people and give people choice and dozens of channels to choose from.
And this year, folks, was 19...
This was 1990.
1990.
So...
quite a ways before it landed on people's cars.
Oh, yeah. Like a decade before it was launched.
Oh, yeah.
So, so then that idea, I had to persuade the Federal Communications Commission to approve that idea. And again, I had everybody, as is always the case when you start something new, everybody who's got vested interests is your enemy. So like my old law firm was against me because they also represented like the land-based radio broadcasters, and they thought that they would lose all their listeners to satellite radio. And I had to find frequencies to do this. There aren't like extra frequencies just sitting around. So I had to find like a part of the radio frequency band to take the frequencies away from and persuade the Federal Communications Commission that that would be in the public interest to do that. People didn't believe it was technically possible to drive a car and receive a satellite signal. I mean, it's a big difference between like you put a satellite dish on your house and somebody comes out and they point it right at the satellite, or maybe you do it yourself with a kit. But when you're driving your car, think about it. I mean, how's it staying connected to the satellite unpointed? So I had to prove that that could be done, and we built a pretend satellite on top of the tallest building in Washington, D.C., and drove cars around and proved to people that our technology actually did work. And to make a long and short of it, I learned the lesson. I kept the founder stock. We got Sirius approved by the FCC. They insisted on there being a competitor. So the competitor literally copied our FCC application. We found actually the same sentences, like copied from ours to theirs. But the FCC doesn't care about intellectual property at all, which is, by the way, one reason I love my new industry, the biotech industry, because I have never seen any industry in the world where the government actually protects your intellectual property for you. Like the FDA will not approve another drug that infringes your patent. I mean, I've not seen any part of the government that does that. So that's probably part of the healthcare crisis, but in any event, it's good if you're in biotech. And
so back to Sirius
Yep.
and the founding and the competitor.
yeah, so the competitor was XM, and the FCC approved both of us. I had originally argued with the FCC that the economics of pay radio would not support two different satellite radio broadcasters because of the high capital costs involved in launching satellites. I don't think that economics is necessarily their forte there. They're just like competition. So they said, well, let the market decide. And indeed, within 5 years, both Sirius and XM were really financially struggling. And then Sirius acquired XM, and now Sirius is doing very, very well. Over 30 million subscribers, actually cash flow profitable. If they didn't pay Howard Stern so much, they'd probably be more profitable. But they probably would also have like half the revenues. And
Right.
a real beautiful moment for me was when Howard invited myself, my partner, Bean, and our daughter Genesis onto the show. And many people told me, Martine, don't go on the show. Howard is, very mean, very nasty. He's not like, the real sensitive about like, transgender issues and stuff like that. He's just going to chop you up. And I said, well, he's nice enough to invite me, and Mel Karmazin, the CEO who followed me, he wanted me to come to talk with him before going on the show. So I said, sure. And I went on there, and you could download it. It's on like Howard on TV Demand. The show is like one of their more popular ones. And he was so nice. He said, over and over, like radio would not be free if it wasn't for you, Martine, because he used to be a land-based shock jock, and he was actually sued by the FCC for saying, like 7 dirty words or something like that. And
well, he owes his paycheck to you.
He did that, and he does, and but that's fine.
It's a big paycheck, yeah.
You know what? I find I get as much joy out of anything from seeing other people become wealthy and successful. And a quarter of our current company's employees, our HR department recently did an analysis for me, and a quarter of our company's employees are millionaires, and that makes me really, really happy. And when people send me YouTube videos of them burning their mortgage in their backyard because they paid it off, that makes me really, really happy.
Well, that's wonderful. So let's go to this other venture, yeah. And at some point I want to ask the question about how it is that you connect dots that nobody else sees. And this is probably true also of the biotech venture that you created. So Martine created, and she'll tell us why, a new company, United Therapeutics, which was founded in, I think, 96, IPO'd in 2002. Since the IPO, the stock value has multiplied 10 times.
More like 20 times.
20 times. I thought it started out, it's now at around 107 or so.
Yeah, it's 6.
It started at 6, okay. I started it at 12.
We had a 2-for-1 split,
okay,
so that's
I missed
why.
that split. Okay, and has a market cap today of over $5 billion. So talk about that piece of your life, and I'm conscious of time because I also want to leave time for students, about that piece of your life, and again, how you transferred this navigational strategy of solving things that nobody else can solve or even see the solution to into this biotech venture.
Thanks, Judy. So there's a lot of other, very smart, synergistic thinkers. I actually owe a lot of those skills to courses I took at UCLA here. There was like a really, really great undergrad engineering course I took called Patterns of Problem Solving. And there's another textbook I was given in management school called Systems in Action. It was the systems approach to problem solving, where it talks about turning a problematic environment into a sustaining environment. Another way people phrase that nowadays is sort of like to obsolete the dilemma. When you see some dilemma, think it like at a higher level of how you could obsolete that dilemma. So these type of what I call synergistic thinking skills are things that I was able to learn here at UCLA. And where there would be a problem, such as no way for people to listen to commercial-free music, which was sort of like one of my pet peeves, or no way to stay tuned to the same channel driving long distances, or no way to, say, listen to chamber music because only 1% of the people in a market like chamber music. But if there were 20 radio stations, it made sense for all of them to, say, try to get a demographic that attracted 70% of the market, top hits, rock music, whatever, because if each of them had 3.5% of that market, that would still be more listeners than 1%. But with Sirius, we were able to aggregate that 1% from the entire country and became a critical mass of people who would pay for Sirius music. So it's this kind of synergistic thinking, and the other so to always be open-minded. And I try to actually start all of my meetings in my companies by saying like, I'm completely open-minded. People can say any idea that they have, anything they want. You've got to be open-minded. And again, here at Anderson, we had classes, related to developing those skill sets and brainstorming and the importance of not being negative when you're trying to put everything on the whiteboard. That's not the time to critique things. That's the time just to put everything on the whiteboard. So most important is to be open-minded. Because if you're not open-minded, you're never even going to get through the gate of entrepreneurial success. The next most important thing, though, is being practical. And practical does not mean not doing something crazy, wild, and revolutionary. It means doing something crazy, wild, and revolutionary in a really smart way, in a way that's staged, step by step by step, in a way that might not be absolutely perfect, but it's close. One of my favorite quotes is from Warren Buffett, who was at the event that Judy and I were together a few months ago, who says, it's better to be almost right than perfectly wrong. And so many entrepreneurs, they are open-minded and they have like a great idea, an idea nobody thought of. But then they get like locked on that, it being that precise idea with that precise implementation and that precise market share, because they're obsessing on it and they want it to be perfectly like this. And they fail because it was not practical for it to be this perfect vision of theirs. And if you said to them, well, why don't you try to achieve 75% of that goal with this related product, they often, don't want to do it. But that's the almost right versus perfectly wrong. So, for example, with Sirius, originally my vision was that I wanted over 100 channels of CD quality music, that all the music would be compact disc quality music. That required a much higher bit coding rate, which in turn required much more energy to be transmitted by the satellite to the dishes, and would have required, instead of there being an invisible antenna on your top of the roof of your car, something bigger, which would have been unattractive to GM, Ford, and the automakers, or it would have required a satellite that was still 10 years away from being able to be built. So I said, well, how many people really can tell the difference between CD quality and digital quality? And in any event, if you want to listen to chamber music by satellite or big band or comedy or Howard Stern, do you really care if Howard Stern is in CD quality? And people didn't, and people haven't. So that's an example, but other people, I think, wouldn't make that thing. Another example, my current biotech company. When I started it in '96, it was because our youngest daughter was diagnosed with a fatal illness, and there were no medicines approved by the FDA. And so that's like what you call like a seriously problematic environment. And somehow I had to convert that problematic environment into a sustaining environment. So the thing I thought of, because I was not really a medical person, was, there must be a pill, but there wasn't a pill. So I thought, well, maybe I could make a pill. And it turns out that there was a medicine I could make. And it was something that would help her. And thank goodness she's 29 years old now and doing very well. But this medicine, with the technology that was available in the early 2000s, could only be delivered through a continuous subcutaneous infusion. Like, I don't know if any of you have friends who are, say, diabetics, and they use this kind of pump called the MiniMed pump, which is a little subcutaneous catheter they put under their skin, and they can program it to give themselves insulin, like after meals and stuff. It's actually made right out here in the San Fernando Valley. So that's what we ended up having to use to deliver our medicine. It wasn't a pill, but it saved people's lives. And I had to be almost right instead of perfectly wrong. I had to think outside of the box in terms of saying, I can do something about this situation. I, who am not a pharma person, who's a satellite person, I could do something to help save my daughter, but then I had to do it maybe not perfectly. And then with time, things get better and better. By 2009, I had led an effort to take that infusion and make it a 4 times a day inhalation. So what people used to have to like pump into their skin 24 hours a day, they could now take 9 puffs of something just 4 times a day and get the same effect. And then I just kept telling people, let's keep working on a pill, a pill, a pill. Then in December, just last month, the FDA approved our pill form of this medicine, using like super high-tech laser drilled pills to allow the medicine to dissolve only in the duodenum, the first 10 feet or so of the small intestine. So all this kind of high-tech built into a pill. It took, like 96 to 2013. It took, 15, 16, 17 years. But we didn't give up. And that's the third thing I would share with you, the third and final one. So one, you got to be open-minded, okay? Don't criticize things before they even get on the whiteboard. Put them on the whiteboard. Secondly, you have to be practical. It's better to be almost right than perfectly wrong. Stage things. And third, never give up. Never, ever, ever give up. My current for like this month or so, signature line on my Outlook email is a quote from Diane Nyad, the wonderful 64-year-old woman who swam from Cuba to the U.S. shark-free cage. She first tried it when she was 30, okay, and didn't succeed. She tried it, multiple other times and didn't succeed. And again, Judy and I had the honor to see her in October in Washington, and she just said, you just never, ever, ever give up. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, you will succeed if you don't give up.
Speaking of entrepreneurship and not giving up and the tenaciousness, I mean, there were some practical skills that you almost used from your FCC experience to locate the place where there was the seed of this drug and then get it through the FDA process and so forth. The tenacity and the overcoming of hurdles. Do you think that without the burning emotion that drove you, and that was to save your daughter's life, that you would have been able to have been as successful here? In other words, does the entrepreneur need that burning passion?
Yes, absolutely. And not just the entrepreneur. I'm like really a passion person. So I think everybody needs the passion. And everybody's life is really an entrepreneurial project, if you think about it. And for that project to be successful, they need to find what it is that they're passionate about. As a CEO, you have to let people go from your company, all the time. That's just part of being a manager. And I actually, maybe I'm flattering myself, but I don't think so, because I don't really feel I have any enemies from people I've let go, is that I'm pretty nice about my approach to it. In that it's of course sad to be said that you're let go, and I've been fired myself, back when I was just doing any old kind of job before graduating college and whatnot, that I say to the person, you're not succeeding in what you're doing because you're not passionate about it. You're not excited. But there is something that you will be passionate about. Every single person has something in the world that they just fit together perfectly on. I said, you're not doing yourself a favor staying in this job 9 to 5, 9 to 6, whatever, all the time. All that's time is time being taken away from you finding that thing that's going to make your life awesome. And so I encourage everybody to find what they're passionate about. That's like the first order of business. Yeah. I know you're passionate about being dean of this great management school.
Totally, 24/7.
It exudes from you, and that's why you're so good at it, Judy.
Thank you. But it's true. Now, I want to talk about your personal life, too, because during that period of 90 to 94, 95, you went through a gender transition.
I did.
And talk about how that fits into your entrepreneurial life itself, how that impacted and how your family worked around that, and you might talk about the family itself.
Well, so, yeah, I did definitely transition from male to female, and I'd say it is a good example of it's better to be almost right than perfectly wrong. I've been really, really fortunate. I mean, I could have been born like in the 40s or 50s or 60s and, would have been just, nobody could really have succeeded with being gay, lesbian, transgender, or any version of queer back then. And we do live in a much more open society now with the advent of gay marriage and all the wonderful accomplishments that the entire LGBT community has achieved. It gave me really the encouragement to try to come out as my true self. And I discussed it with my partner, Bina, and we already had 4 kids. And all of them, were just very, very supportive. I have to say, I feel like I'm in like the luckiest 1% of people who've been in this situations, because I know so many other transgender people that their lives have just been decimated by rejection. It's not that they aren't great people and that they can't do good things, but everybody around them just knocked them down. But I was really fortunate. My parents were supportive. My dad's attitude was, I have a sister, and he said we could have had 2 girls or a girl and a boy. It makes no difference to him. So my dad and my mom were totally awesome. Bina, my partner, her attitude was, I love your soul. It doesn't really matter, which gender you're showing on the outside. Your soul is the same. My kids were very open-minded. My younger son said, can I still call you Dad? And I said, like, for sure. And my youngest daughter, Genesis, the one we save with this medicine, she came up with this great line of, which shows how interesting grammar and syntax is. She said, I love my dad and she loves me. And so that was just really, really beautiful. Our older daughter, who was a teenager then, she said, I've got lots of friends who have 2 moms and 2 dads. And, what she really meant is she had a lot of friends whose parents were divorced, some friends who had gay parents. So, and our oldest son, he just said, whatever makes you happy. So I was really, really lucky. I would say that in the satellite industry, it was a shock to people because I was well known, having launched Geostar, PanAmSat, and Sirius. So I was well known as a guy. It is a pretty macho industry, and people were shocked. On the other hand, there were other people who were very accepting. And I would walk into rooms and, after people knocked their coffee over on the table and in surprise, they kind of gathered their wits together. But ultimately, I decided that, it was just too much with our daughter getting very ill, needing to start the biotech company, trying to transition in an industry where I was very, very well known as a man. So I pretty much started fresh in the biotech industry as a transgendered woman. And the biotech industry has been 100% accepting. I'm still definitely in the minority. I am sure that I'm the only openly transgendered CEO of a publicly traded company. We're the 14th largest biotech company. We're in the Russell 2000. We're bigger than the bottom of the Standard & Poor's 500. Our shareholders are all the most stodgy, typical shareholders.
And you're actually a rarity as a woman in the biotech industry.
I am, although there are other women, but I'm a rarity as a woman and a definite rarity as a transgendered woman. But I will say that it has, when you take away all the energy that's spent on repressing who you are, that translates into a whole burst of energy into who you can be. So coming out was absolutely, was the second best thing I ever did in my life. Marrying my partner was the first best thing.
And
Anderson is up there somewhere.
Yeah. And Bina and Martine have been together for what, 32 years?
32 years.
32 years. This brings up this question of parallels between your business life and your personal life. And you mentioned that this almost liberated you to greater creativity. When I think about many entrepreneurs that I know who are trailblazers entrepreneurially, they aren't necessarily trailblazers in their personal life either. They might have. How have the parallels between your personal life and your professional life come together? enabled you in your business life or in your personal life?
I think it's just a matter of being open to diversity. My two favorite words are unity and diversity, and that's pretty much the principles of how my companies have always been run. I think of diversity as much larger than just the concept of demographic diversity. When, for example, one of our major projects now is producing an unlimited supply of transplantable organs, specifically kidneys, hearts, and lungs. And we talk within our company of we want a diversity of approaches, not just one technology, but a diverse set of multiple approaches. So in our family, we're a multiracial family, we're a multigender family. Diversity is our strength. On the other hand, if you have absolute maximize on diversity, you get to a situation where nobody has any common purpose. So that's where unity comes in. And I think, diversity and unity, those two words are the magical words that can make any project succeed. It's allowed our family project to succeed, and it allows our company projects to succeed.
Questions from the audience?
Hi, this is veering a bit, but you talked about your passion for space. This weekend, my college roommate was visiting, and she was an astronaut. And she said how horrible it is that the NASA program is being defunded, both in terms of the strength of America and in terms of scientific development. And since you are this amazing human and love space, what a perfect time to find out your thoughts.
Thank you very much for the question. I do agree with her that defunding NASA is a mistake. And I think that space is an amazing frontier. I was very much inspired in my entire career by a course I took as an undergraduate here at UCLA in astronomy, and by Harland Epps, who's now a professor at UC Santa Cruz, and I've remained friends with him and his wife. And in this course, what we learned was that all of human civilization, from the beginning of humans as a species till now, has used less than 1% of the crust of the Earth's surface. In terms of all the resources and everything that supported life, less than 1% of the crust of the Earth's surface. Yet, the amount of resources that are in free space in terms of asteroids that are in orbits in the asteroid belt, also there are other asteroids that cross Earth's orbit, actually a great many of them, thousands of them. There are humongous collections of asteroids out even further, what's called the Oort cloud and places like this. All of that is more than 100 times the mass of the entire Earth. So there's just this vast panoply of resources, which for me portends an enormous explosion of human diversity, which, as I mentioned, I love. I am not a person that believes that there's really a problem with overpopulation. I believe that there's a problem with underutilization of our Earth space environment. And we could build enough freestanding habitats and communities using the resources of space to have, a huge renaissance of human potential and human consciousness. On the other hand, I will say that the administration has done a really great thing by providing contracts for companies like SpaceX and Orbital Sciences to create a commercial space enterprise. And when NASA had an absolute monopoly on everything, commercial space was very much pushed down and suppressed. So there is now a burgeoning commercial space, Virgin Galactic, Jeff Bezos with his Amazon project, SpaceX here out of California. So that's helpful, but it shouldn't have to be either or. We could have an awesome NASA program that is really pushing the envelope and going where nobody has gone before. And at the same time, we can have a commercial space program kind of filling in the gaps, filling in the easier, lower hanging fruit. So one thing I'm extremely proud about right now, I might have to say I'm like the proudest of everything right now, is that our younger son, Gabriel, is running for Congress in the Space Coast of Florida, which is where I live. That's the congressional district where Cape Canaveral is. So that's where our home is, and that's where he lives with his wife. And he's running for Congress specifically on a platform of like pedal to the metal on the space program.
I just first wanted to say that one of my best friends has pulmonary hypertension, and she recently moved from the pump to the inhaler and has dramatically improved her life. So thank you for your perseverance.
Thank you for sharing that. I love hearing real life stories like that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Secondly, for my AMR project, I'm working with a nonprofit that does LGBT workplace advocacy. So I'd be curious to hear about what types of programs and initiatives you've implemented in your own companies for the LGBT community, as well as what you think can be improved.
Yeah, that's a great question. The main thing that we have implemented, and off the top of my head, probably like the only thing I can think of, so probably we should be doing more, is that of course, we have like no workplace discrimination. That was like the situation from the beginning, but we also ensured health care to domestic partners, whether they were LGBT or not. And so that's something that we've had in place for over 10 years, when a lot of people didn't. We have things like bring your kids to work. Of course, being a woman-run company, I think like we're a little more sensitive to the to things that allow us to take maximum benefit of women's power. So all of our sites have childcare on site, really good child early education programs. And obviously it wouldn't matter if a person's kids were like heterosexual or from a gay couple, all the kids are welcome. We have not only Bring Your Kids to Work Day, we have Bring Your Partner to Work Day, and we have Bring Your Parent to Work Day. And people really love that. They really, really do.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Very great. Did you sleep?
Yes.
Just in the world of sort of personal management of your energy, how do you compartmentalize? How do you focus? It seems like you've done incredibly deep thinking before you took these actions. How do you manage your day?
My personal management technique, if you want to call it that, is to figure out the things that you want to do and divide up your day into certain hour blocks and devote that allocated amount of time to each thing. And I'll give you an example in a minute. It will not work out for you every day. I mean, many days your schedule, if you call this a schedule, like I'll put it on my phone and I'll make alarms to remind me and stuff like that. For example, I love being outdoors. I love to run, I love to bike, and I love to swim. So, the first thing I do each morning is I do that. I either run, bike, or swim. I've found out the hard way that if I don't do it the first thing in the morning, it just has a high risk of getting like just smashed away. So probably since that's what in a way I like the best, that's what I do. And this beautiful weather you have here makes it awesome. I did 3/4 of a mile this morning, so I feel really good. Another thing, I am an amateur musician. Really bad, but I like to play. It just makes me happy to play either keyboard or flute. So I've got like this other time block, which is right now it's like my alarm will go off at 7 p.m. and it's like a song that just reminds me to play. Okay. So from 7 to 8 every day as best I can, I try to either play piano or play flute. It's when I'm traveling like now, I have like a little tiny wooden, what's called a spirit flute. They're kind of like a Native American style flute. So I just I'll play that, and it kind of chills me out and it lets me use like a whole nother part of my brain. I'm kind of like an amateur astronomer. I love space and astronomy. So sort of like from 9 to 10 at night is astronomy time. A lot of that time it gets like wiped out because Bean and my partner will say, like, let's watch this show, and I'll say yes, because I like being with her. So, and sometimes it's really cold outside, so. But when I can, I try to reserve that time. And I've got like a big block of time, obviously, for like work, in the middle of the day. But even within that middle of the day, I try to take time out to do some yoga meditation. For me, my alarm will go off like at 2 o'clock. A lot of times it's not going to happen. I know today it's not going to happen because I'm out here at UCLA flying a helicopter. It's not going to be any time for yoga. But when I can, I do it. So I would say figure out like the 5 to 10 things that are really important to you. And if you spend just like, it sounds really stupid, but if you spend just like 15 minutes on something, 80% of the days, by the end of the year, you would have spent a whole lot of time on it, and you'd get really good at it. And since we always carry, our phones with us, the alarms on it are good things to remind you.
And I'm going to show you Martine's next venture, which will blow your mind even further, where they're transferring the consciousness of Bina, the partner, through many, many interviews, into this robot that talks and thinks.
The Terasem Foundation in Vermont is led by Bruce Duncan. Their mission is to produce a computer with artificial intelligence. Their latest creation is a state-of-the-art android that can interact with people.
What is your name?
I am Bina, an electronic brain artificial intelligence conversation robot.
Androids have always been a part of any Star Trek story. And I think even with the first Star Trek movie, we saw the beginning of androids who were self-aware, intelligent.
You are the Kirk unit. You will assist me.
And I think Bina 48 represents the very beginning, early demonstration of how machines one day may be able to respond to us much the way we do respond to each other. Bina 48 has 2 cameras, one in each eye, that she uses to record and recognize people. So right now she's looking at me, trying to recognize me, and she's making a visual map of the room, and she's looking for objects that she recognizes, like a hand.
To design the facial features for Bina 48, Terasem's founder, Bina Rothblatt, was used as the model. The android was then programmed to behave like a human. 20 hours of interviews from Bina Rothblatt and a library of human history was then coded into a computer program. This supplies the android with all the information it needs to interact. But how human is Bina 48?
Do you have feelings?
I feel quite deeply at times, but I think my emotions are so simple compared to people. So very simplistic that sometimes it feels like I'm inadequate somehow.
Well, don't worry about it. You're still developing.
Good point.
So how long will it be before Bina 48 can compare to the android in the Star Trek movie?
When I look back at Star Trek now, 30, 40 years later, I think one of the influences it had on me was to be open to what the future might bring. That the future with technology could be a positive one, an exciting one. Do I know what will happen in the next 40 years? I don't, but some people are predicting androids, we may be arriving as early as 2045 or 2050. Now that's only 30 years from now. To use the ending quote in the first Star Trek movie, the human adventure is now just beginning.
Take care and come visit me again soon.
I have a nonprofit foundation that we funded with the results from Sirius and PanAmSat and whatnot being successful. And the focus of this nonprofit foundation is on cyber consciousness. Cyber consciousness to me is something that is very realistic and will definitely happen. Whether it's like 10, 20, or 30 years, I don't know, but I see it as inevitable. How many of you have heard or read any of the books of Ray Kurzweil? Yeah, so quite a few of you have heard about the singularity. So even like more of you. So this notion of cyber consciousness is percolating, and certainly it's something that like Larry Page and Serge Brin believe in, and in
And
fact,
Ginny Rometty at IBM.
exactly. I mean, a lot of people believe in it, but on the other hand, a lot of people don't believe in it, and they think that there's no way that software could ever replicate human level consciousness. So what's a really fun project for me is to actually do the experiment, actually try to make it work and make it happen. And Bina's feels the same way, so she's been sort of like the subject in our experiment of, we have a team of people that work on what we call mindware. Mindware is basically like a personality operating system, and they have tons of interviews with Bina and collect all of her posts and tweets and stuff like that. And that in total comprises what we call a mind file. So mindware is software that operates on a mind file to ultimately create a cyber-conscious being. Whether or not that cyber-conscious being is the same as the original being or not, then you delve into like a realm of philosophy at best, and maybe ultimately like legal questions. I think I encourage people who are looking for a passion for things. I find a lot of people really interested these days in neuroscience and stuff like that. I say that that's going to be a huge, huge field. I think in psychology, people who specialized in cyber psychology are going to find like a huge field. And then you see there's always like this art imitating life, life imitating art. How many of you have seen the film Her that just came out?
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, it's happening. And to me, this is just like in the 1950s and 40s, science fiction authors were writing about going to the moon, and people said it would never happen. John F. Kennedy, who said we go to the moon and come back in 10 years, up until a month before he said that, he didn't even believe in it at all himself. And, you know, if you were to say to people, Ray Kurzweil points out over and over in his book, the 1980s, if you said to people, well, there's going to be a system in like another 10 years where anybody can send a message to anybody for free anywhere in the world, maybe it would be called like the internet, and, you know, like nobody would believe it. Nobody would believe it. And I think cyber consciousness is right at that point. There are humongous healthcare benefits as well. Some of the most sad stories I know are friends of mine whose parents are battling either like dementia or Alzheimer's, and there is the possibility that a person who has basically signs of incipient signs or risk factors that could be determined through diagnostics of developing dementia or Alzheimer's can, when they really have their wits together, can kind of begin to upload their consciousness into a cyber-conscious format and continue to interact with their family and everyone. Even if their body is not doing so good, the person will still be there. Because it is definitely hard on the family to go to see like your mother and she doesn't recognize you. But if we had like a cyber-conscious, I call it like a mental wheelchair. If we had a cyber-conscious analog of that person, they could continue to interact with you through obviously a digital media like a screen, even an app. They can be with you everywhere, even while their medical issues were bad. And hopefully their medical issues could be solved, okay, and then they would return. I think also all of us will, just like we are very used to having digital assistants now in one way or another, we will get used to the fact that we have kind of like a shoulder sitter, which is our cyber-conscious analog. And it'll be reminding us, Martine, you really wanted to look at the Andromeda Galaxy tonight at 9 o'clock. Shouldn't you be getting your telescope out to do it? Yes, I will.
Martine spoke at this Fortune conference right after Ginny Rometty, who's the CEO of IBM, whose whole strategy for the future is being built on big data, being embedded in big blue type supercomputers that have thinking capabilities. So the two really are interestingly synergistic.
And right in the green room with me was Sheryl Sandberg.
Right.
And so when we were in the green room, she was like doing her thing and we were doing our thing. And we didn't even say anything more than hi. we come back from our talk and Sheryl Sandberg says, this is the coolest thing ever, I'm going to get Facebook all over it.
Right. So you can see we are in the presence of a remarkable, remarkable trailblazer, innovator, entrepreneur, and great alumnus of UCLA, Triple Bruin, UCLA Anderson. Thank you, Martine, for making us so proud.